This segment is brought to you by Cornerstone First Financial and my good friend Mark Livingstone, founding sponsor of the John Fredericks Show, 10 years. The rate on a 30-year fix right now, guess what? Lowest in 50 years. You know how long 50 years is? You got to go back to 1970. You know who was president then? Richard Nixon. Spiro Agnew was vice president. 50 years, that's a long time ago. Who won the 1970 World Series? The Baltimore Orioles beat the Reds. See, that's how good my memory is. Now, it's more important than ever to work with a friend you can trust, and I trust only my team at Cornerstone First Financial and Mark Livingstone. They're a mortgage broker and a lender, but they'll guarantee you get the lowest rate of anybody that you have heard. Just call them up. They'll match it or beat it. My friend Mark Livingstone at Cornerstone First Financial. Call him now, 202-625-1221, 202-625-1221, or you can go to online at cornerstonefirst.com, cornerstonefirst.com. And remember that refis, points on a refi, no longer tax deductible. So when you hear about a competitor quoting ultra low rates, they've got the points in there. Remember, it's beneficial to know the facts. These rates are not going to be low forever. Do yourself a favor right now. Call the only company I would ever recommend. I've saved my listeners over the years probably, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe $1 million. Cornerstone First Financial, 202-625-1221 or cornerstonefirst.com. Joining us now, Monica Crowley. Monica, she has a long history. She was a Fox News contributor. She had her own radio show. That was fantastic. And now she's chief spokesperson and communications director for the Department of Treasury and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. Monica, great to have you.
Hey, John. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me back.
Well, so Dr. Crowley, when all this is over, my vision is that you get a radio show back, you go 3 to 6, and you can replace Michael Savage, and I'll be the first person to carry you on my stations in Virginia. First day, day one. What do you think?
Oh, well, that is a very kind and generous offer, John, and I am going to hold you to that. I'm going to take you up on that offer, but hopefully it won't be for another 5 years or so.
Well,
in 2024, 2025.
Well, we're all going to be here, Monica, then, so that'll work. You can hold me to that. Let's get to the failed negotiations. The president's saying that Nancy Pelosi not negotiating with the Secretary of the Treasury in good faith, the president bailing then on the negotiations. Why can't we want a PPP, we want stimulus checks going out to people, $1,200 each. Why can't we just get a clean bill?
Yeah, it's one of the great mysteries of American politics, and certainly over the last couple of months that we haven't been able to reach a deal. And I am disappointed that politics has reared its ugly head in these negotiations and prevented a deal to happen, because we have really big areas of agreement. As you mentioned, stimulus checks, another round of those, another extension of the Paycheck Protection Program that has been such a good help and support to America's small businesses, supporting almost 51 million American jobs over the last several months, help for the airlines, because as we know, John, airlines employ tens of thousands of people all across the country. At every layer of the airline industry. So there are big areas of agreement here. And the fact that politics has intervened because we are in an election year and we ended up at this impasse to the point where the president had said enough earlier this week. He said, I'm going to postpone the negotiations until after the election. And when I'm reelected, we will revisit this and get the American people the help that they need. Unfortunately, many Americans are still suffering. This virus has proven resilient. The economy is in a strong recovery, but there's a lot more work to be done. The president this morning said that he has now begun some additional talks on these areas of agreement to see if maybe we can get some standalone bills to be brought up in Congress and get the American people continuing support.
Where is your boss in these negotiations? I know that he's been working very hard. He's brokered the first two that we had. Are there ongoing discussions now behind the scenes that you're able to share? Where is the Secretary of the Treasury now with Pelosi on the possibility of moving this forward?
Yeah, so Secretary Mnuchin and White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows have been from the earliest days in August trying to negotiate another economic relief package. As it stands now, there are some conversations ongoing, and we will see if people can see past the politics as we get closer to this election and actually serve the American people and what their economic needs are right now. Hope springs eternal, John.
Monica, based on your involvement in this and your understanding, there's basically three pieces that are in agreement, right? An extension of the PPP, while I believe downsizing it so that it actually does only impact smaller companies, and we don't get the Los Angeles Lakers valued at $8 billion getting $750 million the way they did. So PPP without the bigger companies in Wall Street raping the fund, those are my words. And then stimulus checks out to people, $1,200 each, and then additional per child. And the third one being some sort of an airline, let's call it bailout, in order to save their jobs. Those are three basic tenets that all parties agree on?
Those are three major areas of agreement, yeah, and I just want to correct you that on the airlines, we, through the original CARES Act, we stood up a program called the Payroll Support Program, so the airline jobs would be supported during this period of time like PPP with small business jobs. That is not a bailout. It was a loan program. A lot of the airlines, if not most of the major ones, actually are taking part in this program, and we need an extension on that because it originally ran out September 30th when the airlines could be free to furlough workers, and we don't want to see that happen. In fact, Speaker Pelosi last week said she'd be open to a standalone bill. So I know those conversations are ongoing as well, specifically for the airline industry. But yeah, those are the three big areas of agreement, and also enhanced unemployment insurance as well for those who remain out of work. This administration is not going to rest until every American gets back to work, but we understand that there is a void here that we need to step in and fill, and there's only so much that the president can do unilaterally. He tried in late summer with a series of executive orders because he is bending over backwards, as he has been from day one for American workers and businesses. But there are limitations. We need appropriations of money, and that can only happen through Congress. So we are hoping that Congress will, in fact, act sooner rather than later.
John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. We're with Monica Crowley. Monica, long-standing contributor, Fox News, had her own radio show on Saturdays. Fantastic. I used to listen to it all the time. She's now the chief spokesperson and communications director for the United States Department of the Treasury, and Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary. Monica, let's get to the PPP end of this with a limited version, kind of like the airlines, right? They got the loan, now it's run out, they got to furlough workers. A lot of smaller companies, under 100, under 50, however you want to term that, got the PPP and maybe got loan forgiveness if they kept their people on payroll. But that was for like an 8-week period. Well, that money's gone. So you still got, demand is down. You've still got a lot of businesses hurting. They would like another round of this in order to keep their employees on. For the life of me, what else is Pelosi trying to jam in this thing that is not allowing businesses and people and the airlines to get the relief they need?
Yeah, so just quickly on the PPP, the original terms were as you laid out, and as it became clear that the virus was resilient and it was going to need an extension of time, we went back to Congress and had the PPP provisions amended to 24 weeks. Forgiveness now has just started to flow for people who early on got those loans, and they are now being forgiven and going through that process. But look, we have moved heaven and earth over the last several months. And what's gotten lost, John, in part of this is that one of the big reasons why the president was elected is because he had private sector experience. He was a very successful private sector business guy. He came in and brought a private sector business mentality to government. And for decades, everybody said, no businessman could ever win because it doesn't transfer to government. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump came in with this mentality, no, we're going to turn this ironclad steamship of government around in record time. And that's exactly what we did. So he is hoping to do it again because As we said, the economy isn't a strong V-shaped recovery, but there are still pockets of need out there. The hospitality industry, hotels, restaurants, small businesses, as you point out. So we are doing everything we can, as we have throughout this crisis, to remove the obstacles and get the support to the American people.
Right now, Monica, unemployment in the United States has gone down to 7.7%. You know, it was up to 15, 16. Everybody thought if it ever went down before the election under 8%, that Trump would get reelected, because there's your V shape, and the number of jobs that have been added have been incredible. But still, we have states that are under severe lockdown. New York, obviously, if you've been to New York City recently, it's like going down the streets of Westworld. No one there, completely deserted. Michigan, under lockdown still. And many of these other states, California, same thing. What do you see going forward with the jobs numbers in the next month or so?
It has been a pretty remarkable story over the last 5 months. Since April, this economy has added over 11.4 million jobs back to the economy. As you point out, all of the so-called experts expected that we would not fall below 8% unemployment until the end of next year, John. And here we are 5 months in, and we're at 7.9%. Now, that being said, that number is still too high. The president is singularly focused on getting every American back to work. Look, when he came in, he instituted an economic agenda that was based on pro-growth economic policies. And he put all those policies into place: tax cuts, regulatory relief, freer and fair and more reciprocal trade deals, including USMCA, which just kicked in on July 1st, unleashing the energy sector. He had a very clear vision of growth, and he succeeded. He delivered, and then the coronavirus hit. Then during that period of time, he instituted all of these unprecedented programs to help bridge this period of time. Now we're in a strong recovery, and I can tell you that if he is reelected, you're going to see the same boom times that you saw pre-COVID, because all of those progress policies are still in place, and he intends to build upon them.
I mean, personally, I think it would be better than the first term, the first 3.5 years he had, because all this stuff is in place. And the other thing you have to mention here, Monica, is the delineation of these business regulations. I mean, getting the regulations out of the way, letting entrepreneurs be able to go and start businesses without all the regulations and everything else. And people forget that we had a record number of small businesses start during the first 3.5 years of his term. It was a staggering number, the engine of job growth. In his second term, first part of it, Department of Treasury, Stephen Houchen, to your knowledge, what do you think are your department's top 2 or 3 second-term goals?
Well, our responsibility at Treasury is to carry out the president's economic agenda, and we also oversee the IRS as well. But the president has said repeatedly that he is going to build on this pro-growth agenda that he began in the first term. So if he is reelected, as he has said just recently over the last several weeks, that he intends another round of tax cuts, and that includes tax cuts that are targeted to the middle class. If, in fact, he goes forward with that, as I suspect he will, and Congress passes that, then it's the Treasury's job to make sure that that is executed, as we did with the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that generated so much growth. But he wants to make sure that the engine of job creation, the traditional engine of American ingenuity and entrepreneurship and creativity, it continues to be unleashed. That's what gave us the boom times pre-COVID, and that is exactly what's going to deliver the boom times after COVID, as we're already starting to see as we're reopening this economy.
I want to end with one more question here so that we're very clear on this. So all sides want the 4 basic tenets of this, grandchild of CARES Act. They want a new PPP. They want stimulus checks going directly to Americans that qualify. They want enhanced unemployment, and they want to continue another round of the airline loans, right? Those are the four things that everybody is agreeing on. So I guess that comes out to about $1 trillion or 1.2 trillion or something. What is the other $1 trillion that Pelosi's demanding? What does that involve?
Well, she had a lot of things in their original bill and then subsequent proposals that were completely COVID unrelated. They were loading up the bill with all kinds of things. But the biggest ticket item that accounts for almost $1 trillion of the discrepancy, which is what you're talking about, John, is aid to state and local governments. Now, in the original CARES Act, we had about $150 billion going to state and local governments and tribal governments to address COVID-related expenses, because we realized this came out of the blue and we didn't want states and local and tribal governments to be caught short shrift. So we put in $150 billion. A lot of that money still is not spent. Keep that in mind. Pelosi and the Democrats have come back to the table, and their original offer was for $900 billion, almost $1 trillion to go to state and local for un-COVID related expenses. The president and the administration do not want to be in the business of bailing out fiscally mismanaged states and cities for decades, mismanaged. They do not want this crisis being used by the Democrats as leverage to bail out these entities. And so the president and the secretary have said no to that. But that is the biggest ticket item, and that's why there's been this disagreement, this ongoing disagreement, because not only is the overall top line number $1 trillion versus $3.4 trillion for the Democrats, or $2.2 trillion for the Democrats. We were willing to come up. We had a bill for proposal for 1.5, 1.6 trillion, and they would not budge on that. So that's where we got to the impasse. And it's really unfortunate, and I'm hoping that we can get some kind of relief out to the American people, and those in the negotiations can see their way past the politics of this.
Are you going to have an effective communication plan to communicate to the American people that the holdup here is Nancy Pelosi, who wants to leverage the COVID fund at the expense of unemployed people, regular people with children, airlines workers, and those with small businesses, that she's willing to leverage all that in order to bail out her favorite governments and to give tax breaks? Let's not forgive that. Also, she wants the SALT tax reduced for her billion-dollar donors. The messaging on this, basically by the fake news legacy media, is that Trump walked away from the table and nobody's going to get the help they need. How do you change that messaging to reflect the reality of you've agreed on $1 trillion and the other trillion that she wants basically doesn't have anything to do with COVID or CARES or anything? How do you get that message out, Monica?
You have heard the president say this. You've heard Secretary Mnuchin say this. You've seen Chief of Staff Mark Meadows say this. The lead negotiators have been saying this. The Republicans on Capitol Hill, Senator McConnell, Leader McCarthy, they've all been making these arguments. And it's got to penetrate to the American people, because this administration has always stood ready, willing, and able to get America's workers and businesses the economic support they need during this unprecedented time. We did it for the last several months. We are trying to do it again. And unfortunately, we're at this impasse now because the Democrats really don't want to budge. Again, these talks are ongoing in these certain areas of agreement. And I think maybe the politics are shifting a little bit, because you'll recall that the Democrats have some vulnerable members, both in the Senate running for re-election and certainly in the House and some of these swing districts. And perhaps Speaker Pelosi is getting an earful from them, because she has now said she's willing to talk about a standalone bill for the airlines and so on, and those tens of thousands of jobs. So we will see. And again, John, hope springs eternal.
Well, you need to be out there like you're doing on my show and telling people the truth about what actually happened with this CARES Act, and how the Democrats, Pelosi specifically, has just held this up for her piggy bank wish list. And it has nothing to do, nothing with COVID or relief or anything else. It's her pet project. And, I don't blame the president from walking away because she's not negotiating in good faith. You can't negotiate with somebody who's not doing it in good faith. You can't do it, so you got to walk away. Hopefully you can get this worked out. Monica, great to have you on and hear from you. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, John. Thank you.